You're tuning in to a program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are awfully delighted to see you out there. And we know you're out there because every Monday at 2 o'clock, we're right here at the studio bringing you an hour of information we think you can use. And this is the last Monday of what is called Black History Month. And we're going to end on that note today on our telecast, our broadcast. We call it telecast here, but it's really the podcast program here at FlintTalkRadio.com. And I'm George Moss, the host of What's Going On. And we bring to you every week this time Marvin Gaye, who introduces the show with his song. And we will get right into what we're going to be doing here today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about some things regarding black history, including the post that's coming up when I get back to the house and finish up a post I'm working on about the 10 things that should have been said here during Black History Month that were not said. I think the post I'm going to title it as being 10 things, 10 corrections that should have been made during Black History Month, that would have been made if those who are purporting to teach black history would have been honest enough to make these corrections. But we have these wannabes who are in these positions at these universities who want to just imitate the ones that they claim they're correcting. And it has ceased being a corrective of history and has carved out a niche of its own, making where it is just as disturbing the things that are being said here in the correction department that was being said before they got into the line of fire. And we have to come behind the correctors and correct them. But I'll be working on a post this afternoon of the 10 things that should have been stated during Black History Month that were not stated by those who claim to be using this month to correct history. And here they have fallen into the trap of the ones they claim to be correcting, and they're making the same mistakes that were made prior to them getting into the fray. And they need to be corrected too, and I'm going to be doing some of that correction in public, online, and waiting for them to do what I know they're not going to do, and that's get on there and try to correct what I'm saying. I did my last presentation yesterday. I think it'll be my last for the Black History Month. I don't have anything else on the calendar. There were 3 different speaking engagements that I had, and the last one was at the church over here on Pettibone. And we had a very good time there. One of the ladies came to me and whispered before I got up there to give my little 5 cents, said, "You can take as long as you like." They have me back every year, and they told me to keep my calendar open for the last Sunday in February next year. And I always look forward to it because they're very wonderful hosts, and they have a nice dinner after it's over. We have a lot of lively conversation. And yesterday I ran into a lady that was from Missouri, and she was there, and there was a large crowd there. And we had a nice animated conversation after the talk was over, the program ended, and we were downstairs having the after program meal, and I was very much interested in what she had to say, and I was looking at her phone number. I'm going to be calling her up sometime before the week is out, before she leaves going back to Missouri. But it was just very enlightening to have some people that knew something about what we were talking about. And I was very much impressed, quite frankly, with the young people that they had in the program. And one of my former students, I'll give her a shout out. I won't give her last name, but Kimberly put that program on. And it was well done, well organized. And one of my former students that went back to 1972, I think it was. I couldn't remember him, but he was invited to the church to introduce me, and he did a good job of remembering some things from the class way back in that time period. And he did the introduction. I'm gonna have to go back and see what kind of grade he made. If he made, I'm gonna have to change his grade. But it was a very nice program, and I want to commend the church for annualizing their Black History Program. And I think this is my sixth time speaking at the church. And they told me, some of the women in the church told me that they were playing with the minister and said, well, why don't we let Mr. Moss go somewhere else this year? They said we were playing with the minister. He said, no, we got to have Mr. Moss back. And so I look forward to it, and it's a very good, they have a nice program every year. Some of the persons that used to do programs have now canceled their programs. I guess they think they've arrived because we don't need to discuss this anymore because Barack Obama is now president, so they don't do too much anymore. This church is still going forward and carving out a program during the month where we can actually talk about some of the historical facts that children may not be getting in school. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with groups pulling their group aside and teaching them some things about what they've accomplished, which all groups do that. And there's nobody better at it than those who have set their children up in their own schools and made sure they would understand where they've been and what they've accomplished, and therefore give them some idea what roads they need to trod as we go forward into the future. So history does play a role, and we have to be aware of all people are grounded in, first and foremost, what they've accomplished, and they use it as a stepping off point to accomplish more things, which benefits the group and also benefits the world. Nothing is wrong with that. Okay, so today we're going to we came to the studio to talk about the last vestiges of Black history for this year. And I want to start off by some things I didn't get around to saying yesterday on the program. You know, you have all these notes and things you want to say, and you get up there and you start getting inspired, and you move away from your notes. And before you know it, you don't say all the things that you intended to say. But I did want to make the point, which I'll be making today on my Facebook wall, that there are some things that we need to understand about how Black history, back in the time period when Carter G. Woodson conjured up the idea in 1926 of having what he called Negro History Week. And that was even a challenge for him to get that even recognized, because there were a lot of people saying there was no such thing as Negro history, which is the word they were using at that time for blacks, before blacks were told by Jesse Jackson that they were African Americans. And you go over there in Africa and say it and see if you don't get your feelings hurt. But in 1926, when Carter Godwin Woodson carved out a week in celebration of what was called Negro history, he had a problem getting that on the dais, because there were a lot of deniers at that time that were saying there was no such thing as any accomplishment made by quote unquote Negroes. And of course, if you look in a map trying to find where Negro land is located, you wouldn't find it. So, if you're calling people under assumed names, or not even using a name, using a color, because the word Negro is really in Portuguese and Spanish, and it means black. And so I don't object to the word Negro, because I know that when you say you're black, you're just using the English language, and then the language that was used at first, because the Spanish were the ones in control over here, you were using the word Negro, but that means black also. So what's the objection? And the objection, by the way, is more of a modern thing than it was back in 1928, when the objection that W.B. Du Bois, for example, had was that the word should be, in fact, capitalized. But when Carter G. Woodson conjured up the idea of having some time set aside, especially to talk about Negro, quote unquote, Negro history, he was fighting against some of the forces out there that were making the claims that no such thing existed, because they had not yet carved out any history as a people. In Arnold Toynbee's words, who wrote the book called A Study of History, he said, "as of yet." So he didn't completely close off the door that there was not some possibility that would occur. He just simply denied that it had happened at that point when his book came out in 1953. That was one version of it. I think the early version, 1940, somewhere around there. But he was saying that blacks are, I think he used the word Negro. Negroes are the only ones who have not contributed anything to civilization. And then he said, as of yet. So at least the door wasn't completely closed to the possibility that they would, in fact, make some contribution in the past. And then you had this person named Carroll writing his book in 1900 called The Negro a Beast. And as I said in the church yesterday, that I think the reason why they couldn't find in Negro history was because they were looking in the Tarzan movie and thought that they need to look in the orangutan family, and that way they would find some history conjured out by blacks. But it was put there as a corrective, and I don't think we understand that was the carving it out in 1926. But that's not what this celebration should be doing today, because we don't have anyone denying that there was no such thing as a black history contribution in the past. And nobody's writing that today. And yet we continue to celebrate as if that denial is still in place. And I think that's typical of what we do in these celebrations. In fact, I was given this 2-page history list that was drawn up by somebody at the church yesterday, and it was well organized, but they had certain cards, and they would have them read what the information was on the card, and then somebody in the church was supposed to answer who the person was and things like that. And one of them was, for example, in the Black History Trivia, they would ask, he was also the first, African American to be depicted on a postage stamp. And they were supposed to, give, and somebody in the church could raise their hand, they would call on them, and they would say Booker T. Washington. They might have someone say, read another card that would say he became the first black coach in Major League Baseball, and that would be Buck O'Neil. And they would have that kind of exchange. It's very good to do that for the young people, but really, and then you have some people with famous black quotes and black inventors. Let's see what's on the next page. And they might have one in terms of black first, who did this, the first one to do X, Y, and Z, and who did blood plasma, things like that. And those are very good things to do as sidebars. But that was what was necessary in 1926, because you have to then, if people are denying that you made any contribution, you have to then come behind them and say that this person was in fact black and he did this, this, and this, and this person was made a contribution. Here he was over here in this place, and he contributed this to this particular culture. And you show some blacks making contributions in Europe, so that Europe can make the claim that it was in fact a civilization untouched by anyone else other than Europeans. And then you can kind of show that we all kind of have benefited from the cultural creativity of that mixture, meaning that, we're all mixed up here in terms of this culture being a hybrid, or to use Ted Nugent's words, a mongrel, the mongrelization. People saying people are mongrels and things like that. We're all mongrels in terms of there being a mixture. Nobody's in fact pure, and no culture is pure. We're all mixed up in here together. And when we can appreciate that, we will be able to appreciate why we are a world of difference, and that should be celebrated, not to be demeaned and put down and act like that's something that is abhorrent to the human condition. It's all inclusive, and it's not either or, but it's and both, and we want to enlarge upon that as a human characteristic. We can talk about racial things as a way of segmenting into it, but we eventually got to get to the point that we are a human family. But it's okay to have the month set aside too for a particular embrace of those contributions, and I would encourage that continue, and that other groups get involved in celebrating them. I would not have any problem with other groups coming together, talking about Irish history, having a parade in New York, and de Blasio up there in New York. I would have a problem with him telling me that he can't go to the parade, but he will go to some of the other things they will be doing. But he can't be out there marching with them because it's exclusionary to the Irish, and they've been doing it every year with no problem. And then he gets in there, and all of a sudden, them pulling themselves to the side and saying, "This is how we do our cultural bent. Here's what we want people to know about the Irish, and here we are." All of a sudden, it's a problem. It shouldn't be a problem. Let other groups do it also. I think we can all go in there. And there were some whites in the church yesterday, and I didn't see anybody up there squinting, and nobody was up there saying, sit down. I wasn't getting that because I was trying to be inclusive in terms of all I'm trying to do is say that the pattern that we're looking at and the picture we have of history is larger than you think it is, and I can't touch on all of it, even in looking at it from this standpoint. That doesn't cover all of it. And they were telling me, well, every year you say something different. Well, it's because you never get to the end of it. But let's understand that what you're doing is embracing the history and making it hopefully speak to the conditions of the times. And what I'm getting at in terms of how it's celebrated is how we are still doing it as if we're back in 1926. But the things we're fighting against right now, and the battering ram that we should use Black History for, is no longer to get recognition of what blacks have done. So all it's about standing up and saying that so many scientists were black and Jackie Robinson broke the color line. I mean, you can do that. Don't get. I'm not against having some reference to these first, but that's not what's necessary now, because nobody denies that they are at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood, that they are there too. What I want to do is look at how it should be used right now, and the way I see it. This is just small speaking, but I've already written 2 pages on this article coming up. It's going to make a lot of people upset because I'm taking on the Afrocentrists, who I am their mortal enemy, because I think what they've done is a travesty.
When I was a kid, I recognized this early on, even in 4th and 5th grade. The feminist movement was going on big in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I became just really acutely aware of it, that they didn't want equality. They're striving to supplant the male-dominated society with a female one.
That's right.
And I brought that up to people. I brought that up when I was in 4th and 5th grade to teachers who were feminist. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we're not feminists. We just believe in equal pay for equal job. Well, if it's the same job, we get the equal pay. But even I had issues with the fact that, they were, even this young, as a youngster, I saw that their animosity and the way they're trying to rewrite everything was basically, they weren't satisfied with the idea of trying to bring it up so everybody else is equal. Mm-hmm. They wanted to override somebody else. Mm-hmm. They want to dominate.
Right.
And see, that's what I see with a lot of the, I see with a lot of these groups. Once they're like they're like oppressed and stuff like that. Once they get into power, they try to go overboard and rewrite history to make them look like the, you just begs the question of, if that was the case, they're always in the superior position. Yeah. Females being like at one time, or the blacks or whatever. If they always were superior, and then it was just recently supplanted, and they're now in the subjective role. Why isn't that recorded anywhere? Mm-hmm. And you just hear like crickets in their response.
Mm-hmm. You're making another good point. We have in 1944 we had this book published by Garner Myrtle, the Swedish sociologist, who wrote the book, 2 volumes, The American Dilemma. What John is referring to is the dichotomization of oppression. And that is where those who are fighting against oppression are doing it out of one of 2 different dichotomies. One of which is to extract your humanity from the oppressing agent, and therefore in the process to redeem the oppressor while you extracting your humanity from the clutches of the oppressor, but you're redeeming the oppressor at the same time, and that's very honorable to be involved in. But there's another dimension that we don't talk about, and that is you can also be involved in it because you seek not to redeem the oppressor and extract your humanhood from the oppressor, but you seek to replace him and become an oppressor yourself. And that dichotomy we've not looked at. I mean, Amilcar Cabral made this point. He said that one of the things that the Africans made a mistake in out there when they're fighting against the colonial presence is that they forgot that they were militants and not militarists. But when you pick up the gun and you got the gun in your hand, and you got the gun in your hand because the oppressor has the gun in his hand, then the question is, when you get the oppressor off of the shores, what do you do with the gun that's in your hand? And that's that dichotomy between fighting against oppression, but then that gun in your hand is potentially to make you an oppressor yourself. And all you have done, if you take that particular course, is you replace the oppressive agent and have mimicked him. And so somewhere the struggle then becomes one of not redemptiveness at its core, but to replace the one that was in power and place someone else in power who mimics the same behavior. You have to be on guard against that. The question that Amilcar Cabral raises is, are you a militant or are you a militarist? Because the militant who is using military tactics puts down the weapon once the threat that he rose up against has been removed. And that really is the difference between the American way and what you saw in France. Because when you look at our history in this country, and it's a proud history. I don't care what Oliver Stone's talking about. I mentioned him in the first part of my writing today too, because I think these people are traitors. But what sets America's history out, particularly at the foundation of this country's inception, when this country was being conceived, as Lincoln would say in 1863 in the Gettysburg Address, conceived in liberty. It's conceived in liberty. The conception is that of liberty. It doesn't mean that everybody was free. It means that the nation was conceived around the idea of freedom. And that is to say, this nation is the first nation in human history that was conceived in liberty, in the idea of liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, everybody like Oliver Stone would act like, well, everybody wasn't free, so how could that be the case? Because the conception has to be brought into existence once the perception has already occurred that it needs to exist. It doesn't happen in the same time space. You conceive it, and then you work toward the fulfillment of the conception. I don't know why that's hard for people on the left to understand, as they want to critique the experiment here. And you ought to go read, when I talk about books, you ought to read the book by Ann Coulter. I think that book needs to be read, particularly starting with chapter 6, if you want to forego some of the parts that may not be quite as perceptive in terms of her analysis between the American Revolution, I think that's chapter 6, and then the French Revolution, which is the next chapter, where she is comparing these two revolutions. And the difference is that when the American Revolution was over, and it didn't end for, if you say that you're going to start in 1776, it didn't end until 1783 when they shot the British to the peace table in Paris and forced them through gunpowder to sign the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and showed them through gunpowder that their reign of terror was over. And they weren't convinced of it because they thought they had a round-trip ticket when they signed the peace accord in Paris, but we had to show them the door again when they came back in 1812 and thought they were going to come over here as a conquering agent, and what really was the second time around. And they were shown the door again, and that's what Francis Scott Key is writing about when he's in Baltimore in that prison, writing, the flag was still there, and writing what became the national anthem of the United States, because in the War of 1812, they had to be shown the door again. But look what happened in the aftermath of that war. No heads rolled. Benedict Arnold ran to Britain, and he's over there. But in terms of the ones who were not fighting on the side of the colonists that prevail, no heads rolled. There were no guillotines involved in it, because the conception is that we are fighting for liberty. You couldn't just turn around and say that you're going to do what King George III did, and what they did is something marvelous to look at, and that is they were determined not to supplant the ferocity with ferocity of their own, and they put a new nation in place that was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition. Now, did anybody say that they were dedicated to the fact that they were going to do it? It's going to be done in anyone's lifetime. I hate to be the one that break it to anybody out there in the radio land, but the work of fulfilling the requirements of liberty is never going to be done, because of what Thomas Sowell writes about in one of his books. I think it may be the one called Barbarians at the Gates. I think his book is called Barbarians Inside the Gates. And boy, is that a revelation? They used to be at the gates, and now inside the gates. Look at the universities, and look at these colleges in the country. But what we have here is that every generation brings barbarity into the world with them. When you have a new generation born, you have the presence of barbarians that bring barbarity through our own children. That's why every generation has to be civilized. So that is never going to be done. In other words, there will never be a time when there will not be some work for a generation to do, because no generation can do it before that generation arrives, and then things are fixed for all times. That's what Paul Robeson, by the way, was telling Harry Belafonte, the one that's so angry right now that he can't see anybody who disagrees with him as being anything but an Uncle Tom or an Aunt Thomasina. That's why he was criticizing, on the one hand, Clarence Thomas, can't stand him, and then Condoleezza Rice, he can't stand her, and Colin Powell. Okay, you get a little bit of a pass because you're not completely, out of your mind by their standards, so that you get a little bit of dap. But mostly, those over there on the right, you're supposed to be insane. And this man is very, very angry, because he thinks that in order to be down with the cause, you got to be in full lockstep agreement with what he's talking about. As if he has been handed some tablets on Mount Sinai, and he came down, and all of a sudden he has the vestige of all the things that have ever been true in the history of the world, and it's all cased inside of the two spaces between his ears, and he knows it now. But Harold Belafonte records that he had a conversation with the great Paul Robeson, who, if you know, Paul Robeson had lost everything during his time here. I think Robeson was used by the left. We need to talk about that in terms of how he's used by the left. And he lost everything because he was committed, but the left was using Paul Robeson. And when he had lost everything, here was Harry Belafonte coming up with calypso music, sitting as an artist at the feet of Paul Robeson, who had been an artist before Harry Belafonte arrived on the scene, singing calypso, opening his shirt up and letting people see his chest and all that. And he's a very handsome guy when he's young. That's before he became the bald eagle. And Belafonte asked Paul Robeson, he said, Paul, you lost everything. You were so committed, and you had this viewpoint of what you were trying to accomplish, these principles you stood on, and in the process, you lost everything. Would you do this all over again, knowing the outcome or what it was you were trying to accomplish would come to this particular end? And Paul Robeson answered Harry Belafonte. I don't know if he learned anything from it, but he answered and said they would do the same thing over again. But here's one thing he didn't know. And that was when he started out, what he didn't know is that every generation has to rise up and save itself. If y'all, if anybody thinks that, and as Derek Bell, you may remember him from the time that when they showed Obama up there at Harvard University speaking in defense of Derek Bell, that was in trouble with the administration because he was up there as a person over his head at Harvard University with no resume and no credentials, and was in there because of affirmative action, and they were ready to get rid of him because they didn't read his writings and saw he was up there writing his pap. Well, you see Obama over there, out there. They have some films of him as a student over there defending Derek Bell, who really should have been hired in the first place. But Derek Bell got a book called "And We're Not Saved." No generation is saved. Every generation has to save itself, and that's where I think that we are missing something in terms of how Black history is being studied today. You don't need to be talking about all the scientists and Jackie number 42. And Jackie Robinson, we can talk about that. I mean, that's nothing wrong with bringing that up. But the question is, how can it be used to solve the problems of the day in which is being exercised into the public domain? I mean, the public square is for a discussion about things that's relevant to the times. I mean,
this current administration just seems so willing and wanting to shut out anybody who has any kind of disagreement with their stance on anything. Mm-hmm. It's probably, we are fighting for the soul of America right now. I mean, if people look at the World War II, they know World War II happened, but they don't actually look at why that was so significant for Americans, because they were retaining where the generation at that time was trying to retain that which was good at that generation, allow for the broadening and the realization of the idea of America at the same time. And they were, in my opinion, they were the greatest generation. I mean, probably since the time of the revolutionary generation. Mm-hmm. And so they did
World War II.
World War II people, the era. Because they had a commitment to each other. Let's face it, these people here, if you ask them to give up their cell phones for 2 weeks, that'd be a major imposition. They forget the fact that my grandparents, my dad, my mom, and all those people would go, they actually had to live on the rationing coupons. They couldn't have gas to go anywhere they wanted to, pretty much. They had to have so many gallons per week per car in the family or per family. Nowadays, the generation now would not suffer that at all. They would not allow that at all.
You're right. I do consider the persons in World War II to be among those who were the greatest generation. You could go back and look at the founders, of course. I don't think anybody can put anyone above the founders, but certainly those who commensurate with their efforts and who are worthy of being the ancestral group, the ones that group was ancestral to them in spirit. I think that the greatest generation is those persons that stormed up Normandy and faced down Adolf Hitler. Now, here's what I said in my post today: is I'm just getting started. I've gotten 2 pages of it done. I got to do the rest of it because I haven't gotten to the actual topic yet. I'm going around it, and then I'll come to the specific part of what I want to write. 10 things that we should use Black History to correct for this month. But what I've said so far is that that when Eric Holder said that we are a nation of cowards, what I was saying was, when you look at the greatest generation in World War II, I can tell you this: Hitler didn't think they were cowards, and Tojo found out that through Harry S. Truman. I know what we say. I was told others would say about dropping 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, and 3 days later dropping another atomic bomb on Nagasaki, August 9, 1945, and they still didn't surrender until 6 days later, August 15th of that year. But what they were telling Tojo and Hirohito is they were telling them that we were not playing with them. That's what they were saying. And you can claim all you want to. We didn't lose the Vietnam War. The politicians lost it.
You know what's ironic too? It's always they blame Richard Nixon for the entire Vietnam War. These liberals out there, and it's just they just totally evade the idea. Eisenhower, a Republican, did send advisors in 1950s, but the first person to die in that conflict, who was an American soldier, died during the Kennedy administration, and then LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, escalated the troop involvement in Vietnam. Because, and there was, I don't know if you ever heard this or not, but The reason why they say that he did that for, his wife owned stock in the company that was going to be making the newly adopted M16 rifle. Mm-hmm. And after it was adopted for official use, then we increased our troop involvement in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. But very few people actually address that. But they blame it totally upon Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. And it was a Democratic Party that lost Vietnam for us.
Yeah, and my thing, and I'm saying this also in the Post today. My thing is that we should not get involved in any war where there is no inclination to win it or no possibility we can win it. For example, in nation building. You can't win a war if the war is being fought to build a nation. People have to decide that for themselves. They couldn't have built a nation here unless we had decided as a people that's what we're gonna have. We have the conception this country is born in liberty, and we have to fight to bring that about. We have to decide that. You can't decide that from the outside. But any war we get involved in, and I don't know what these politicians' problem is, but any war we get involved in, we got to get involved in it with every resource we have to throw on the battlefield. And if we feel the war is worth engaging in, we get to bring the total might of the United States to bear upon that war in the battlefield. Otherwise, you're just simply out there sacrificing the best and brightest of this country. And don't ever give a person that is really a patriot any power in this country, because if they're patriots, they're not going to allow our soldiers to be on the battlefield without the things that they need to win the war. And I think that's why people didn't understand this criticism made last week about Thomas Sowell. A lot of the people on the right were criticizing Sowell because he was taking Ted Cruz to task, because Ted Cruz was gung ho to fight this battle, and what Sowell did was discuss Dunkirk. Where they went in there when the British knew that those soldiers in France were going to be slaughtered because Hitler's army was on the march and going in there where they were. And when the British found out that their ships were too heavy to go into shore to get those soldiers out of that line of fire, the British people got on boats, anything that could move, and removed 100,000 soldiers out of Dunkirk. Why? Because they could not win the battle, and they were able to fight another day. And what Sowell was saying was, take a page out of that, because if you're going to shut the government down again because you can't fight this at this point. Now, I had another view of it, but I understand what Sowell is saying. That sometimes you have to keep your soldiers so that the battle that you fight next time you can win. In other words, we need to fight that battle. There's no doubt about that. But there's also a battle that's probably going to be more important, and that's the next battle. That's the one in November. Because if you're going to change the course of this country, we got to win some elections. We got to get these liberal, communist imposters out of power.
Did you hear what Howard Stern said the other day?
That's what I was getting ready to come to. Yeah. Because Howard Stern, people were saying, they didn't think they could agree with anything Howard Stern said. And, he is a nut. But Howard Stern shocked, I think everybody in the right probably fainted when they read what he said, because Howard Stern said last week, that he would never vote for a Democrat again because they're all communists. And they are. That's who they are in that party. And the Republican Party, they're not much better than that. In other words, both parties are big government parties, one just worse than the other. I don't have any confidence either one, and I don't think there are any conservatives up there. You say none. I'm not talking in absolute terms. I'm saying that when you go to looking at the numbers of those persons who are really trying to conserve that, when you say conserve that which has made this country great, those numbers are not great. Not in Washington. They are totally absent in the Democratic Party. I don't think anybody out there can name one person in the Democratic Party who you can say is a patriot. John, do you think that? I don't think that there's anybody in the Democratic Party who's a patriot.
When I look at the John Kerry, I look at Hillary Clinton. All I see when I see these people are career opportunists. And I'm not saying the Republicans don't have that. I'm not saying that. I mean, it's rampant, both parties. But you're right. I have never seen anybody stand up for the principles from the Democratic Party, the principles that this country is allegedly founded upon. They seem to be totally absent and silent on that issue.
And I said last week that if there was any patriotism in Washington, the IRS would never have dared, if they thought the numbers of patriots in Washington was significant, they would never have dared to target people that had patriotism in their name. How could that happen? That you're saying that the Tea Party, this is kind of named after the Patriots, and that's an outlaw group.
What you know what's weird though, they've embraced an idea that the Germans did after World War II. And the Nazis were like, the bad guys, they destroyed them. So I was in DMOA, a Masonic organization. But in Germany, it's an international organization. But after the Nazis came to power and they were defeated, the one of our virtues that we inculcated in our youth was like basically was the idea of patriotism. And over there, they couldn't discuss patriotism because that would mean you're aligned with the Nazis. And the left constantly would pick away. They take that from. You probably can understand it more understandable in Germany at that point because they had the association with that word, especially in that generation. But they picked it up and they pulled it into Europe. Now that if you're a patriot, you are somebody to be opposed and feared. Mm-hmm. And they're just overlooking the fact that what our values are and our ideas are, and what Europe were vastly different. Mm-hmm. And they made patriotism basically. What I'm saying is basically they made the word patriotism a dirty word.
Mm-hmm. And it's outlawed here. I think that's what the problem is with Dinesh D'Souza right now. And I like they had him on the Kelly Files. Fox is the only one really out there that's trying to hold, and they may be ideologically driven, but they're the only ones out there right now. Only our national network is out there, cable network is out there, trying to hold this administration to account. And they had on there last week Dinesh D'Souza, whom they have indicted for some trumped-up charge. They was overly involved and overly aggressive in financing campaigns in New York or in a candidate had no chance of winning. They're going to claim that he was in there throwing money in there under different names so that he would not be held to account because there are certain limits upon how much money you can throw into the political arena for any particular candidate. And yet they got these other persons here talking about they're going to spend $100 million in these campaigns, no problem. But Dinesh D'Souza, Megyn Kelly asked him, do you think that you're being targeted because of what you've done in terms of your films on the Obama administration? And what Dinesh D'Souza said, and I gave him big kudos for this, he said that if he thinks that what I've done in the films I put out so far been bad, wait until you see the one called America. The one that's coming out, I think, in March. And I can hardly wait to see that one. But he's not backing down. And I think everybody can see what's going on there. The man is a patriot. This man appreciates his country because he knows the country from whence he came and that he would never have had the success over there in India. As brilliant as he is, and he is brilliant, he would never have been able to accomplish there what he's accomplished in the United States. And as a person that came from another country to realize what this country offers, he's very appreciative of that and trying to protect it.
Yeah, I met Dinesh D'Souza about 20 years ago.
You met him?
Yeah, down there at the Christian Coalition Conference. I think it was 92, 93, something like that. Yeah. I met him, got a chance to actually talk to him for a spell. So, I mean, it was pretty intriguing because he was going it was after he made a speech. He talks about him being from India and let's face it, I talk to Indians on the internet and they tell me about, they appreciate America because even though we have a corrupt government, the stuff still gets done. Whereas over there, they're stymied. It's stalled, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but Dinesh was a really nice guy to talk to about that.
Yeah, and he's just an absolutely brilliant person. And his films have just been very enlightening and very courageous. And I'm not surprised they targeted him because there are no patriots in Washington. Or the numbers of patriots there are not significant enough to hold back these clubs, these club-wielding institutions like the IRS. All these institutions, the NSA, these are nothing other than tools of intimidation by the federal government, which has no respect for the Constitution and rule of law.
You know, by the way, I keep on interjecting here, but LBJ was the first one to use the IRS as a bludgeon against people because church groups were criticizing him from Texas, you know, and he was from Texas. So he set the IRS upon them, and they revoked the IRS revoked those particular churches' tax-free status away from them.
Yeah, he certainly used it, but let's be honest about the beginning point when we see with Roosevelt. You know, Roosevelt before Johnson.
See the blatant use that we're doing now, like, you know, for
Yeah, the
political
blatant
reasons.
use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, let's face
Yeah,
it.
more blatant.
Basically, the adoption of the
Yeah.
IRS is basically for the Marxist program, the idea to get a graduated income, you know, a multi-leveled income tax in place.
Yes.
The redistribution of wealth attempts.
Yeah, because we would not even have had that if we had not had the communists or the Democrats. Because look what happened under Woodrow Wilson, who is really the formidable force that began to incubate this socialism into the mainstream of the federal government. I mean, this man was horrible. And when you look at all the changes, I looked at, when I was looking at the amendments to the Constitution, you know, the Constitution had not been amended from the time of 1809 until 1865. That's how, we weren't amending the Constitution that much. If you look at in 1809 with the 12th Amendment, we didn't have another amendment added to the Constitution until 1865. That's amazing.
And then look at afterwards, just every so many years, there's the addition to the amendments.
Yes, look under Woodrow Wilson in terms of the 16th Amendment, which was right before he took office, but he had been elected, was passed, and we have the amendment, the 16th Amendment. We hadn't had an amendment added to the Constitution after 1870 until Wilson's getting ready to assume office, which took place in 1913, and then look at, and which had been the 16th Amendment, the income tax. And then look at the 17th Amendment, and then look at the 18th Amendment. I mean, it's amazing how many times the Constitution is amended under these progressives. As if you can just simply go in here and just start moving things around, even changing what the founders had in place in terms of how we elect senators in this country. I mean, that's horrendous that we would fail to understand what they were trying to do by, in fact, giving the states a voice in the federal government because they wanted to restrict the federal government. And how is that working out for us? Once we got rid of how we elect senators in this country, where it's no longer the states electing the senators, we send them up there like we send the House of Representatives up there, and look what they're doing. They're up there doing the states in and voting against states' interests and putting all this nonsense in place.
You know what's like? I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, but I get like emails all the time from guys or congressmen, senators, or guys who want to run for senator, congressman from different states who want me to contribute to their campaign. And I think the states, senators, the senators from those states should represent the constituency of those states and not have so much influence coming from the outside.
Yes, the reason why we had the House as the people's body, and the check and balance of the House would have been that if they don't do the people's will, they go back to the people every 2 years, and there's an instant kind of accountability in place so that if they're not pleasing their constituents, they can be thrown out in the immediate time period. They're not up there doing damage for as long as, let's say, the senators would do. But if you are, in fact, electing the members from the state legislatures for the Senate, they can be recalled any time because they are there at the pledge of the states. And therefore, they are subject to the recall by the state legislatures. That is even more instant. So they didn't have any fear of the Senate getting out of control. When you have the Senate that has a 6-year tenure, and then you elect them the same way that you elect the members of the House, they don't have the immediate recall of what they do because they're serving 3 times the amount of time the members of the House are because the intention was they serve the pledge of the states and are subject to innocent recall by the states. But if they're elected by the people, as are the members of the House, then they would serve 6 years. And that's not working for us. And so I understand the idea that you want more of the people's voice to be heard, but that wasn't the intention. And this idea that you want to democratize, the way we elect the senators, that's a mistake that we make, because we got this idea that democracy is what was intended by the framers. And that's not true. The word democracy, as John Stossel was trying to teach him at this one university, we had all these college students there anyway, he was asking them, is the hell of the Constitution, and asked them, is this word democracy, where is it found in the Constitution? People were saying Article 1, Article 2. And he told them it's not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution, because it wasn't intended.
It's like, the old Army manual, my friend pointed this out to me, the old Army manual that the guys used to get when they went into the Army, would tell you the difference between democracy and a republic. We have there's a democratic form of government to some degree, but it's republic means there's rule of law, because if it was a true democracy, the bulk of the people, the majority of the people could elect to harass or harm the other half of the population. If they had,
That's
and
right.
so the republic was set up to enshrine the rights of the individual, whereas a democracy, when it comes down to boiling it down to the brass tacks, would be considered mob rule.
It is mob rule. It is certainly mob rule. I was glad that I was waiting to see if you're going to get to that point. It is mob rule. It's mob rule by popular sentiment. For example, we have mob rule in America because we suspended the Constitution in the 3 branches of government. Neither one of these branches of government appeals to the rule of law in this country. Not even the Supreme Court. John, did you see the comment made last week by John Paul Stevens? Wasn't that something?
Yeah.
Now, he stepped down from the court in 2010. And this joker, this imposter, who sat on the bench all those years, and underneath it, this guy is saying that we need to, in fact, change the Second Amendment. I didn't hear him use the word amendment. He meant to do what Obama is doing, that is to go around it. I mean, if you don't like it, then just go around it, which is what the court is, in fact, doing with his rulings. Just go around the law.
But I watched the History Channel, and they have a lot of stuff about Jefferson's and Jefferson violated his own ideas of limited government and what the government can do when he made the Louisiana Purchase. So this abuse of power was even going on with the people who brought this country into existence.
Isn't that the case? Thomas Jefferson corrected the violations of John Adams, whom he came after as a third president, but he in fact did some things too in 1803, as you were saying, in terms of his illegal purchase of the Louisiana Territory, which there's no authorization of the president having an authority to do that. And we have to be very careful in terms of calling attention to those who violate that which is written in terms of what they must follow on the federal level, because it is subject to being abused if we lose sight of what is required by the rule of law that's written in our Constitution. And we're losing that. In fact, I was saying, you see, so many things we're talking about. I'm writing on my wall in this post I'm doing on Black history, and what I was saying on my one of the things I was saying on my wall is that when you look at this president during Black History Month, if we are going to be using Black history for a purpose now necessary today and not for the purpose of which it was being set up in 1926, because the purpose that it should serve is now different, we need to use Black History Month to call this president out. I know he's the first black, well, he's not the first black president, because I read 2 different documents. The first acknowledged black president, but there was some that were not acknowledged because there was this single drop theory that they had about who was black, who was not black. And Barack Obama's mixed, so, I mean, you could say black or he's not black based upon which one of the family members you want to put him in the family of. He's got 2 different families and 2 different sides of racial divide. Okay, he's black if you say he's black. You can say he's also white.
Well, besides, I mean,
that's the definition you have to get to.
Barack Obama wouldn't even know how to relate to the average black family or person out there in the U.S. Because let's face it, you look at his background, look at his pedigree. I mean, his education. I mean, it was all upper crust.
I'll tell you something else in terms of traveling. You can't find another black person on this planet. I'm convinced of this. and this is the first time it's been said anywhere, and I'm saying it here publicly on the air, and I've also written a little bit about it on my post. I have not seen, and I've traveled in probably a little less than a third of the countries in Africa, and I have not seen a black person like Obama anywhere that I've traveled. And I don't think a person like him even exists on the planet. Because when you look at his background and all things he went through in his background, there are no other blacks who've gone through those things. I mean, how many persons have mixed parentage? The stepfather is also different from the two parents because he's Indonesian. So here's Barack Obama. His dad is Kenyan. So he's not even an American black. His mother is American, a white American, a European American or a white American, you want to call it. His dad is not even an American black. His dad is Kenyan. Then his mom marries a person who is neither like his father nor like her, and the stepfather is another person. And Obama is in that family going back and forth, not knowing where he is and who he is, based upon different changes in the characteristics of the family he belongs to, and from age 6 to 10 is in Indonesia, in the more formative part of his years. So that would be grades 1 through, 4? Grades 1 through 4. And he's in a madrasas in Indonesia. You can claim he wasn't in a Muslim school. He's in a Muslim school. Even if he's in a Christian school, he's in a Muslim country, the most populous Muslim country in the world.
I mean, his middle name is Hussein. And historically, that's the brother-in-law. The name of the brother-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. That's right. The name of the Prophet Muhammad.
And look at the fact that a name. They say a rose is still a rose, but no matter what name you call it by, I understand that. But what you call something also has resonance. You call somebody by a Muslim name all his life. We're not talking about Barry here. That's an Anglicization that goes on to try to hide the American aspect. But let's go and look at what they called him. Nobody was saying Barry in Indonesia. They're saying Barack. And they were saying Hussein. And they were saying Obama. You haven't heard that name in anybody who's ever been in power in this country. You can claim what you want to. A name does have resonance, it does have meaning, and it does have power. Because you're being reinforced into an identity based upon what somebody calls you. If somebody calls you by some of these names that they use in the past for a lot of the different groups in this country, you keep calling somebody that and see if it doesn't have an effect upon their psychological makeup. Use the N-word and just keep calling people that. Or some of these other bigoted names you heard, like the Polish names that they use. You keep doing that and see if it doesn't have an effect upon a person's outlook, his psychological profile, his personality. It doesn't cause some kind of psychological distortion. See if it doesn't do that. And this person never. You look at his background. You go look at the book called Dreams from My Father. Just read it. And you see there's some confusion here. And I see it in terms of what he does in terms of policy. But if we're going to use Black History Month to deal with the problems today, and these problems today are not the problems of the time period in which Carter G. Woodson existed. I know what he's trying to do. But to be using it to do that work today, we have not understood those times have changed. Today, we need to use it in order to clarify the issues that need to be talked about and corrected during the year 2014. And I think, and I'll be saying this on my wall, it'll be probably the last of the 10 points I'll be making, is that Black History this month, what should have been said is that Black History Month should be used to call this president out. And I'm calling him out and calling Eric Holder out also and asking and saying that Eric Holder needs to be impeached right now. And if Black History is not being used to do that, it's being done to a disservice. Okay, that's what I came to say. And I think we will close out the month with those comments. Hope you will stay tuned to Satori's Black History Corner coming on at 3:30 today in about 30 minutes. Stay tuned for that program. I'll be certain to tune into as I rush home to see it live. And stay tuned to all the programs here at flinttalkradio.com. Until next time, we want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.